Emotions. What would life be without them? Would you want a life without emotions? I wouldn't. But what are emotions? What is their nature? And should we trust our emotions? Should we manage our emotions? Should we challenge them? So, if we want a life filled with emotional experiences, isn't it critical that we fully understand what they are, how they work, and how to fully use them to create the best life for ourselves? I think this is a critical question. So let's dive in and see if we can get more clarity about emotions and how they work. Let's start with something obvious. We all have sensations. We experience sensations through our five senses: the warmth of a loving touch, the smell or taste of your favorite soup or dish, the bright light of a sunny day, or the sound of a child laughing. Those are all sensations, and they are a result of a physical stimulation. Air waves hitting our, eardrums, our skin, and so on. And so we have a whole nervous system that transmits those sensations to our brain, which is programmed to use that input to determine if something is good, if good is going on, or something bad, which is when we feel sensations of pleasure, if it's good. If something is going bad, we feel pain, and we try to avoid it as much as we can, like instinctively jerking our hand away from a hot stove if we touch it. Even if something is just not right, such an infection or something that's going internally, our nervous system will transmit those sensations to the brain to let us know that something is threatening our health and well-being. Okay, so those are sensations. But what about emotions? What triggers emotions? Well, if we pay close attention, we can see that it is the same type of mechanism, but one in which the triggers and the responses are different. Emotions are a result of a psychological stimulation. Something happens, it could be something someone said or did to you, and then the result is some kind of an emotion, some type of an emotion. The trigger can also be a thought, a recollection of something that happened in the past, or something you project about the future, and that can create an emotion. So emotions are a response mechanism, just like sensations, but they are triggered not by one of our five senses, but through a conceptual faculty that we have, our mind, our ability to think and evaluate and judge. Just as our nervous system is designed to protect our lives and signal to us through sensations of pleasure or pain, indicating if something is good or bad to our well-being, so are emotions designed to preserve the mental well-being of ourselves. And that's how we experience that. But the judging mechanism which creates the emotions is not instinctual. It is programmed. I know that emotions feel like automatic responses, but that automation was not there when we were born, like sensations. You had to program your mind to decide what is psychologically desirable and what is not. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that emotions are not a primary. Unlike sensations, to emote, you need to know something about what triggered the emotion in order to judge whether it is good or bad to you, desirable or harmful. We need prior knowledge, integration, and evaluation in order to feel anything. At the core, it is the question of emotion. Is that thing that just happened or my thought good or bad for us? Should this result in more joy or suffering? So since you were a baby, you've started integrating judgments into your subconscious mind, which became automatized over time to the point where emotional responses feel like they're automatic, but they're not. But as I mentioned, they are not instinctual, like the sensations we have in our nervous system. Now, we know that even the nervous system is not infallible. Just think about the pain of a vaccine shot or a visit to the dentist, which so many kids are afraid of. Our sensations do not automatically know what's good for our lives. Our reasoning mind can and should override those unpleasant sensations and endure them in those cases where we know it's good for us. Such is the case with emotions. Emotions depend on value judgments, as I said. Again, because every emotion you feel had a trigger that you might not even be aware of, and that trigger is a judgment which is trying to discern, is this good or bad for us? What are those value judgments and where do they come from? For example, we feel fear. when we judge that there is a threat to our values, right? Such our lives or our well-being, our property or someone we love, or maybe even our work. We feel desire at the prospect of gaining a value. We feel joy when we gain a value, or the sadness if we lose one. All those feel automatic, but they are value judgments. There's a great quote by Ayn Rand that explains exactly how emotions work. Quote, just as the pleasure-pain mechanism of man's body is an automatic indicator of his body's welfare or injury, a barometer of its basic alternative, life or death, so the emotional mechanism of man's consciousness is geared to perform the same function as the barometer that registers the same alternative by means of two basic emotions, joy or suffering. End quote. So you see, you can think of your sensations as a pleasure-pain mechanism and your emotions as a joy-suffering mechanism. But how does the value judgment process actually work? Let's continue the other part of that quote by Ayn Rand about emotions. So quote, she says, emotions are the automatic results of men's value judgments integrated by his subconscious. Emotions are estimates of that which furthers men's values or threatens them, that which is for him or against him. Lightning calculators giving him the sum of his profit or loss, end quote. So who is that judge in your subconscious mind that passes evaluation and judgment? Well, that lightning fast judge that determines what kind of emotion you feel is your accumulated knowledge and integration of everything you know. The way you decide to evaluate and integrate everything that happened to you and everything you know about the world is in there. You decide what you love, what you hate, what you value, what you despise. Those decisions become premises integrated by your subconscious mind, which then acts as the standard for your emotions. For example, I'll give you an example from my own life. I remember that after my daughter decided to enlist in the army, I immediately felt frustration, helplessness, and even some anger. I didn't know what standard my mind applied to send me that mix of emotions, but that was the immediate response I felt. And unfortunately, as you will see later, I acted on those emotions. So the question remains, how is that judge in your subconscious mind decides what's good and what's not? And what kind of emotions to evoke? This is the core issue to understand emotions. If we don't know how those decisions are being made and then act on our emotions, we are basically slaves to an unknown, unexplained, an unexamined process of our own making. So, and I see a lot of people being slave to their own emotions. But because this is the Examined Life project that we're here discussing, we don't settle for this. So let's keep diving into the mechanism. How do we program our subconscious mind to become this supreme judge of our feeling, all of our feelings? It is done either consciously or carefully or subconsciously and kind of whimsically. Here's another quote from Rand that explains the exact process of the judgment that happens. Quote, since the work of man's mind is not automatic, his values, like all his premises, are the product of either his thinking or of his evasions. Man chooses his values by a conscious process of thought or accepts them by default, by subconscious associations, on faith, on someone's authority, by some form of social osmosis or blind imitation. Emotions are produced by men's premises, held consciously or subconsciously, explicitly or implicitly. End quote. Wow, I think this is so clarifying and penetrating to what's going on. Think about it. Have you done the work of deciding exactly what you think about everything that happens to you and make sure that your emotions align with what conscious judgment that you have? Or do you find yourself surprised sometimes or just not thinking at all about the root causes of your emotions, just taking them for granted as facts or truths? You know, people just say, this is just how I feel about it. So let's go back to my example. When my daughter decided to enlist in the army, I immediately felt this frustration, helplessness, and anger. Why? What did the value judgment in my subconscious mind have to believe is true to send me that exact mix of emotions? Well, I asked myself that question, and here's what I wrote as the answer. I wrote in my journal, enlisting in the Army is not the right choice for my daughter. I've been in the Army, and I know that it is not something she'll enjoy or learn from like she thinks. She made the choice because of peer pressure, I believe, and because she's evading the question of what she really wants to do with her life. So she's defaulting. I am frustrated because despite all of our discussions, she still decided to enlist, and I feel helpless because I can't do anything about that decision. She made up her mind. I'm also a bit angry because honestly, I expected more from her. She's intelligent enough to know that this is a bad move. Pretty logical, isn't it? First, I felt great about having to put the reasoning behind my emotional reaction into words. It was clear to me. It was like shedding light on this value judgment or judge in my subconscious mind, allowing me to see clearly how those premises evoked those emotions. So that was one step. But, and this is the big, big but, are those premises rational? The fact that I can explain the reasoning and the logic behind my emotions doesn't mean that they are rational and logical. As I said, just as sensations are not infallible in discerning if something is good or bad for you, like a vaccine, emotions are definitely not infallible. To make that point, let me continue the example of my daughter and see what happened. I asked myself, are my reasons for feeling frustrated, helpless, and angry justified? Are they true and rational? To answer that, I asked myself a tough question. What are the premises behind the reasons of my emotions? What do I have to believe is true, desired, and just for me to think the way I think about it? And then the cat came out of the bag. In order to think that I should be frustrated and angry with my daughter for making a decision to enlist in the Army, I have to believe that first, I know what's good for her. I know that better than her. That my daughter should listen to what I have to say and should take my guidance to make her own decisions. Is that true? Did I listen to my parents when I was 19? Did they know what's good for me? Did they know what kind of life I wanted for myself? No, they didn't. They couldn't have. And what good parents do is allow their kids to be independent, make their own decisions, and support them in the process of trying, failing, and then succeeding. This is what I've done. I basically realized that the premises behind my reasoning for my emotions were wrong and unjust and deceiving. So what does that mean? It means that my current emoting process yielded emotions that are misleading into taking the wrong actions. And indeed, I let my daughter know how frustrated I was with her, and that really hurt our relationship pretty badly. We stopped talking for a while. But after I realized that there's a mistake here, I asked myself, what can I do to change and alter the core premises that drive my emotional responses? How can I train or retrain my subconscious mind to change its premises? What I did was what anyone does when they program their subconscious mind to begin with. I thought about it, or hopefully what everybody does when they do it. I thought about it. I consciously thought about it. I verbalized it, and in some cases spoke to myself in order to listen to my new conclusions. I said things like, my daughter owns her life. She is not me, and her values are going to be completely different than mine. I cannot know what's good for her. And I shouldn't forget that a 19-year-old is not a 50-year-old. And as her parent, I should be supportive, benevolent, and I should voice my opinion only if she asks for it, which she didn't at that case, right? So I told myself, dear Tal, rethink your premises and see if you can feel something different that will guide you to a new course of action. That's what I wrote in my journal. So what do you think happened? After a short period of time, much shorter than you think it would take, I immediately started feeling something completely different about the situation. I actually felt sad that my daughter and I are no longer talking because of my mistake. I felt hopeful and empowered to resolve the situation. And I was motivated to call her and change the dynamics because now I have this new found realization that I can fix it. I did all of that. And you can imagine what happened next. We bonded. I said, I'm sorry. She appreciated that and so on. So it didn't stop there. I started paying attention to many other cases where my emotions, especially negative ones, or as I call them, protective emotions, not negative emotions, because emotions are just messengers of value judgments, and you shouldn't kill the messenger. So I call them protective emotions. So I began to reflect on my emotions towards other people, events, situations, and started scrutinizing the rationality and the premises underlying those emotional responses. I have to say that with the power of this process, I've ironed out so many wrinkles in my thinking. And the results were nothing less than life-changing. The level of self-trust in my thinking and my emotions grew dramatically. I didn't feel torn about almost anything because I made the effort to clarify to myself the premises and values behind my value judgments and ensure that my conclusions, all of my conclusions, which influence my emotions, are rational and guide me toward the right course of action. And I live well with my emotions and I understand my emotions. They're predictable to me. I do all that. Now I do that all the time, especially when two values appear to be in conflict. There's really no conflict if you do the thinking and do the work to clarify to yourself what is more important to you. In the new context of your life as it is right now, I feel less anxious about taking risks because I don't let ignorance and overestimation of risk take over my emotions and paralyze me from doing something new. I feel less regret and apprehension about losing some values in order to pursue better ones for me. This is the value of all of this. To share something personal, I recently went through a divorce after a 30-year relationship. I would not be able to make such a decision if it were not for this clarity of values and premises in my thinking. I took big, risky steps and had a lot of ups and downs associated with it, but it was still the right move for me because I clarified my premises. I actually created a tool, which is a tool that I call the 7-question introspection guide, and it has done wonders for me. So I want to share an example from it and read you another kind of step-by-step, question-by-question responses on how you can use this. It's part of my my workbook that you can find on my website, talsafani.com. So the 7 questions in this 7-question introspection guide about emotions are, first, what is happening? So it's like going to the court and just reporting of what's happening. No evaluation. What is happening? What do I feel? And at the end of this workbook, there's a whole dictionary of emotions, like dozens and dozens of dozens. And it's really important for you to increase your vocabulary of emotions to know exactly what you're feeling. So the second question is, what do I feel? Third is, why do I feel it, right? What is the cause? What is the trigger? Or what is the need at stake that evoked that emotion? So that's the third thing. Like, remember what I did is explain to myself why I feel what I feel. The fourth one, and it's one of the hardest one, is what is the thought or value judgment behind the feeling? What do I have to believe is true, rational, objective, just, in order to feel this way? And that's where you realize if what you thought, what the reasoning for your emotions, is it true or not? And then you can either validate, yes, this is true, this is just, or not. And then you have to change it. The fifth question is it rational? Is it objective? Is it just? And is it true? And you write something about that. The sixth question is, what do I do next? How do I use all of that to create a course of action that will lead me to the right, to pursue my values? And the seventh one is really a meta one, which is, what did I learn about this? For instance, with the example of my daughter, I learned not to voice my values or enforce my value system on someone else. They are their own human being. I don't know who they are. I don't know what they want. How can I judge if something is good or bad for them? So I learned to be much more reserved and kind of keep it to myself and not voice my opinion unless someone is actually proactively asking me to. So this is the 7-question introspection guide. I urge you to go to my website, talsafani.com, and download it. It's a very powerful tool. So there's so much more to say and share about understanding emotions, but I don't want this video to be way too long, so I'll stop here. But I do invite you to do something very important. If you have questions, comments, please write them down, and I promise I will record other videos answering any questions you have about emotions, how to deal with them. But for now, here's what I suggest you do. Observe your emotions, name them, understand them, check the premises behind them, and fix the ones that turn out to be irrational. And then learn how to enjoy them, how to experience them towards a happy, examined, and deep life. Thank you very much.